you're 35 or close to it, your career is probably more established than it was 5 years ago. Your bills are probably higher than they were 5 years ago. And somewhere in the back of your head, you wonder, how much does the average 35-year-old actually earn outside their main job? Not the headline cases. The actual average. You scroll past the YouTube videos promising $40,000 a month from dropshipping. You don't believe them, but you also don't have a real number to compare yourself against. So you sit with that uncertainty, sometimes feeling behind, sometimes feeling fine, never feeling sure. And the uncertainty itself is part of the problem. If you knew the real average was, say, $20 a month, you'd feel fine. If you knew it was $8,000 a month, you'd know you needed to move. Not knowing means your brain runs a worst case scenario by default. Today, we fix that using real 2025 and early 2026 data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Bankrate, LendingTree, and other primary sources. The numbers are going to surprise you in a couple of different directions. Not in the way the gurus suggest, in the way that actually reflects how Americans live. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, side income psychology, and why the average number that everyone quotes is almost always misleading for whoever's actually trying to use it. If you've ever wondered whether you're behind, ahead, or right on track at 35 when it comes to outside income, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up giving you some honest perspective on where you really stand. Before we get into the numbers, one quick framing thing: the 35-year-old is right in the middle of the millennial generation, which is currently the highest earning side income cohort in America. So the numbers you're about to hear actually skew higher than they would for almost any other age. If anything, you're getting the optimistic version. The boomer numbers, by comparison, are way lower. Let's start with the headline. 27% of American adults had any side income in 2025. That's down from 36% in 2024 and 39% the year before. So if you're 35 with zero side income, statistically, you are not behind. You are in the 73% majority. That number doesn't comfort everyone, but it should at least correct the idea that you're uniquely failing. You're not. You're squarely in the most common pattern. Now, here's the interesting layer. Among people who do have side income, the median monthly take is $200 at Bankrate, $400 at LendingTree, $200 to $400 a month. That's roughly $2,400 to $4,800 a year. Not nothing, but not, life-changing either. The brutal stat hiding behind that number: 28% of side hustlers earn between just $1 and $50 per month, less than a single grocery run. But the average is much higher than the median. Bankrate reports the average side hustle income in 2025 was $885 per month. LendingTree reports $1,215. Two very different numbers from two reputable surveys. Both technically accurate. They just measure slightly different populations. What both agree on is that the gap between average and median is huge. The average is roughly 4 to 6 times the median. That gap is the whole story. It tells you that side income, like most income distributions, is dominated by a small number of high earners at the top. About 10% of side hustlers make over $1,000 a month. That 10% pulls the average way up. The other 90% is concentrated near the median. So when you ask how much the average 35-year-old earns outside their job, the honest answer has 3 parts. Part 1. Most 35-year-olds, around 73%, earn nothing outside their job. Part 2. Of the 27% who do, most earn between $50 and $400 per month. Part 3. A small minority, roughly 2 to 3% of all 35-year-olds, earn more than $1,000 a month. And that small minority is what pulls every average upward. That's the real picture, not the misleading single number that gets quoted in headlines. And critically, that picture stays mostly the same whether you look at 35-year-olds, 40-year-olds, or 30-year-olds. The age makes only modest differences. The structural distribution is what dominates. Now, let's get specific to the 35-year-old demographic. Bankrate breaks down side hustle income by generation. Millennials, which includes pretty much every 35-year-old, average around $1,129 per month among those who have a side hustle. Highest of any generation. Gen Z averages 958. Gen X averages 751. Boomers average 561. So if you're a 35-year-old with a side hustle pulling in around 800 to 1,000 a month, you are slightly below the millennial average, but well above the median. You are in the upper half of side hustlers. That's a real perspective shift for most people. They assume 800 a month is mediocre. Statistically, it's actually quite good for a 35-year-old with a side hustle. There's also a meaningful gender pattern in the data worth flagging. Bankrate found that men with side hustles average around $1,195 per month. Women average $611. That's nearly a 2-to-1 ratio. It's not because women are less capable. It's because the side hustles that get marketed to women tend to have worse unit economics than the ones marketed to men. So when you compare yourself to the average, also adjust for which population you actually sit in. The average for a 35-year-old man and the average for a 35-year-old woman are, substantially different. That difference is one of the reasons women statistically underestimate their own progress in side income. They compare to a number that includes men. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks multiple job holders, which is a slightly different population, people who literally work 2 or more separate jobs. In November 2025, BLS recorded 9.3 million Americans with multiple jobs, the highest number ever recorded since they started tracking it in 1994. 5.7% of the workforce. For the prime working age range, which includes 35-year-olds, the rate is around 5.2%. So roughly 1 in 20 35-year-olds works a literal second job. The rest, if they have side income, are doing freelance work, gig economy, or building small businesses on the side. The multiple job holder number is interesting because it's been climbing steadily. It crossed 9 million for the first time ever in 2025. The trend is not slowing, which suggests the structural pressure that's pushing 35-year-olds towards side income isn't going away anytime soon. Cost of living keeps outpacing wage growth. Housing keeps getting harder. Healthcare keeps getting more expensive. The 35-year-old in 2026 is facing a different math problem than their parents faced at the same age. The math problem is what creates the side income pattern, and the math problem isn't going to suddenly resolve itself. So the side income trend isn't going to reverse. If anything, the next 10 years probably see more 35-year-olds with side income, not fewer. Let's also talk about who's actually doing what kind of side work, because the type matters. According to LendingTree's 2025 survey, the most common side hustles among Americans are delivering food or groceries at 15%, online freelancing at another 15%, and part-time or seasonal work at 14%. Those are the 3 main categories. Each of them has a totally different math behind it. Delivery driving caps out at maybe $20 an hour after expenses, and your car depreciates with every shift. Online freelancing has a wide range from $10 an hour to $100 or more, depending on skill. Seasonal work pays minimum wage plus a slight bump. The 35-year-olds making the highest side income are almost never delivery drivers. They're online freelancers, consultants, or running small specialized businesses. The math for those categories scales. Delivery driving does not. This is critical for context. The $1,100 monthly average for millennials is heavily driven by online freelancers, not delivery drivers. If you're a delivery driver pulling in $500 a month, you are not actually behind the average. You are working a fundamentally different vehicle than the people who pull the average up. Comparing your delivery driving income to an online consultant's income is like comparing the wage of 2 completely different jobs. The numbers may look similar in a survey. The economics are not. The vehicle you choose matters more than the hours you put in. A 35-year-old freelancer working 5 hours a week can outturn a 35-year-old delivery driver working 20 hours a week. Same person, same effort level, different vehicle. That's the entire game. Now let's get into why 35-year-olds are the most likely group to have meaningful side income. The 35-year-old in 2026 grew up watching their parents survive multiple recessions. They started their careers in or around the Great Recession. They saw the COVID layoff wave hit their peers. They do not, by default, trust their employer to provide stability. So they hedged, they built optionality, they figured out side income early. They also have the digital fluency to monetize a skill online. They came of age with the freelance internet. They know what Upwork, Etsy, Fiverr, and platform marketplaces actually look like. and they are facing real cost pressures. Housing is dramatically more expensive than when their parents were. Childcare costs more than college tuition used to. Healthcare keeps climbing. So 35-year-olds didn't necessarily start side hustles because they're more ambitious. Many of them started because the math of one income simply stopped working. That dual driver, both pressure and skill, is why this age range pulls higher than every other in the side income data. But here's the part most people completely miss, and it might be the most important point in this entire video. The average is the wrong number to anchor on. Completely. When you ask how much the average 35-year-old earns outside their job, you are asking the wrong question for your specific situation, because the average is shaped by people whose lives are structurally different from yours. The 35-year-old running a 6-figure freelance practice with 5 years of client relationships built up looks very different than the 35-year-old just starting to think about side income for the first time. Comparing them on the same average is, basically meaningless. What matters is where you actually fit in the distribution, not where the misleading average sits. The distribution at 35 looks something like this. About 73% earn zero. About 15% earn between 1 and 200 a month. About 8% earn between 2 and 1,000. About 4% earn over 1,000. Where you fit in that distribution tells you which gap is actually relevant to close next. Average tells you nothing useful. The other thing the average doesn't tell you is the trajectory. Someone earning 1,000 a month who's been doing it for 10 years is in a totally different position than someone who hit 1,000 last month for the first time. The trajectory matters more than the current number, and the average has no concept of trajectory built into it. If you earn zero, your next gap is $250 a month. That gap is small. You can close it in a few weekends with almost any modest side activity. If you earn 50 to 200, your next gap is to 500. That gap requires picking a better vehicle, not just doing more of the same thing. And here's where most 35-year-olds get stuck. They try to do more hours of the same low margin work, drive more deliveries, take more low pay freelance jobs. The math doesn't work because the vehicle is the limit, not the hours. If you earn 500 to 1,000, your next gap is to 2,000. That gap requires productizing what you do and starting to attract repeat customers. This is where the structural shift from transaction to system happens. The 35-year-olds who cross this gap usually become the people described in the Bankrate top 10%, the ones who pull the average up for everyone else. Each gap requires different moves. The mistake everyone makes is trying to skip 3 gaps at once. That almost never works. The other mistake is staying at one gap level too long because the dollar amount feels okay. 200 a month is fine, but it's not where you want to be 3 years from now. Pick the next gap deliberately, not by default. Look, here's the thing. Nobody on YouTube wants to say the average 35-year-old earns very little outside their job. The median is a couple $100 a month. The mode, the most common amount, is 0. You're not behind for not having mastered this. You're average, most people are. But average is just where things are. The real question is which gap is actually achievable from where you stand right now. And the answer is almost always the next one. Not 3 gaps out. Just the next one. The math doesn't care about your feelings about being 35 and not having figured this out yet. The math just wants to know your starting point and your direction. You're not failing if you're at 0. The system isn't built to push you out of that state. It actually benefits from you staying there because you're a better customer when you're financially captive. The financial industry sells you products that work best when you have one source of income. Banks, insurance companies, brokerages. They optimize for the captive customer because the captive customer is more predictable. None of this is a conspiracy. It's just the structure. Knowing the structure exists is the first step in stepping outside of it. The 35-year-olds who built real side income started, almost without exception, with a tiny first step that felt embarrassing. Tutoring one kid, selling one design, freelancing one weekend. That tiny first step proved the system worked for them. Once that proof existed, expansion got dramatically easier. The tutoring became 3 kids, then a Saturday morning routine, then word of mouth, then a small list of regulars. The one design became 3 designs, then a portfolio, then steady and bound. The freelance weekend became 2 weekends, a month, then 4, then a parallel income stream. None of these arcs are dramatic. None of them happen in a single quarter, but they all start with a step that feels too small to matter. The 35-year-olds who don't have side income usually aren't avoiding a hard step. They're avoiding the small step because the small step doesn't feel important enough to take. That's the trap. The first step always feels too small. It is too small. It still needs to happen. Your future self is counting on the move you make this quarter, not next year. Not when things calm down. Now, trust me, they'll thank you for picking the right gap to close first and ignoring the misleading average that everyone else is anchoring on.